I'm not entirely relaxed with the title. I think the first part is really challenging, but I don't feel in the position to really tell Baltic nations where to go. But I will use this opportunity to share with you some of the experiences of the Nordic development of what is usually labeled the Nordic. And then it's up to you whether you want to learn from our achievements or our failures. I would like to start from actually a notion that is in the foreword to the Human Development Report by President Thomas Ilves. And he points to the fact that in our efforts to enhance human development, we should not do this in a way to put a burden on future generation. And I think this fits very well into the concept of sustainable development. It's put down in the Brundtland report that we need to sort of meet the needs of the present population without compromising the ability of the future to meet its needs. And we have to, when it comes to social models, reflect on not only the ability to our systems to meet the common the current social needs, but also to base our programs on something that I would like to call economic sustainability. And I will come back to what I mean by that later on. And also to base it on political sustainability. We cannot have social systems in a democratic society without the support of the majority of the population. One other starting point is that talking about welfare models can actually be very useful if you want to summarize very complex patterns of similarities and differences between countries. It's also, I think, an excellent way to try to capture some of the underlying strategies that we can see when policymakers have designed systems of social protection. And here we can sort of detect that there are different principles for awarding benefits, and there are also different principles for financing the delivery of these benefits. I think that it's important, though, if you want to learn from the Nordic experience, to separate the concept of a Nordic model from the driving forces, or the political ideologies and ideas that have been driving the development. Not separate from the consequences this has, because usually we associate the Nordic model with equality and things like that. And this may be outcomes of Nordic institutions, but I think that it's important to have a strict institutional perspective on the design of our social programs if we want to learn something for the development of social protection systems in other contexts. I have, together with my colleague Walter Korpi, tried to elaborate such an institutional perspective on welfare state models, welfare state strategies. And here you see the four models that we see today in I think, a global perspective, at least among the most advanced industrial nations. And the targeted model is about means testing social provisions, giving only to those in need. The basic security model is the typical beverage model, where you give the same benefit to everyone. And the state corporatist model has its roots in Bismarck in Germany, where the organization of social protection is done separately for different corporations, different segments of the labor force. So workers have their programs, self-employed have their programs, state employees have their very generous programs, etc. And then what we call the encompassing model, which we can find in some of the Scandinavian countries, where so that the basic provisions in Beveridge model are combined with earnings-related models, benefits in the Bismarckian system, but with a unified system. And we have been trying to sort of look at what kind of redistribution strategies that we see behind these different models. And we said that the target model is a bit like Robin Hood. It's taking from the rich and giving to the poor. And everyone loves that. Simple egalitarianism is this basic security. You sort of take the same from everybody and give the same amount. The corporatist model is sort of reinforcing the solidarity, but only within the corporations. And then we try to be witty and taking from the Bible, this, which is in Matthew, that you should give to those who have. And this is often seen as a bad redistribution strategy. So why support the middle class with taxpayers' money? Because there's always a scarcity of resources, as we heard in the previous session. But our argument is that only by including the middle class in the system of social protection can we actually get politically sustainable support for being generous to the poor. So the Robin Hood strategy sounds wonderful, but taxpayers don't like it because the state only takes from the taxpayers and gives nothing back, but only gives to the poor. So that's the sort of, I think, redistribution logic of a sort of mature Nordic model. In more concrete terms, it's of course a much more complicated story. And this vision of the Nordic model might be a little Swedish-centric, but since you are not Danish or Norwegian, you are perhaps not so sensitive to that. But it's important to see that it's a combination of universal benefits paid to families with children and old people, with earnings-related social insurance paid to the labor force. But that if we want to sort of distinguish the Nordic model from the Southern European, continental European model, it's primarily the social services that is distinguishing. Both in the sense that they are more generous, sort of from the cradle to the grave, they are decentralized, administratively and financially separated from the social insurance systems, and they are awarded as individual social rights. Of course, this is the nice part of the system. The nasty part is the taxation thing. There is no such a thing as a free lunch. We know that from the Americans. And the provisions are financed with a combination of income taxes, employer contributions, and local taxes. And very important here, it's a tax system that feeds everyone as an individual, not as a household. So the incomes of men and women are separately taxed even if they live together. And historically this has been sort of combined with a full employment approach, in Sweden in particular, coupled with active labour market policies. We've seen some cracks in this model starting in the 1990s, and I'll come back to that. And it's clear that there have been achievements, at least in terms of reducing poverty and inequalities. But I think it's important to point out that it's no miracle. The fact that the countries have been successful in these endeavors is related to the design of the programs. And a lot of it has been related, in my view, to the universality of the benefits, the earnings-relatedness of the system, which has been a way of dealing with what we usually associate with the big welfare state, namely incentive problems. By avoiding these tested benefits, we also avoid to create poverty traps for poor people. And of the recent decades, the systems have also shown increased and improved cost control. Yet it's not a miracle either, in the sense that we in the Nordic countries have been eradicating poverty altogether or social problems. We struggle with poverty pockets, as I would say, and partly related to the new challenges with a large immigrant population and with young people coming into working life at times of or periods of high unemployment. What I think is important, though, is to sort of move beyond the core social policy protection programs, the cash benefits, and to see that the model has been resting on what I would label a Schumpeterian approach, in the sense that it has been positive to free trade, exposure to global markets, understanding that this has potential to create wealth by letting firms compete, and meaning that the efficient firms will survive, but the inefficient firms will not survive. And of course that might create a lot of social tension unless you try to make winners out of the potential losers. And you can only do that if you train and equip those who are left behind by the inefficient firms, so that they can become employees of the successful firms. And I think this is one important explanation by the fact that when you look at the attitudes of the populations in the Nordic countries, they are more positive to globalization and competition, and this is because there are better experiences, better policies to deal with the potential downside of this sort of Schumpeterian approach. Now, we know that globalization is not a new phenomenon, but it's clear that it's putting increasing pressures on countries with high taxes. And in addition to that, we also know that we, in our part of the world, and this goes for the Nordic countries as well as for the Baltic countries, not to speak about the rest of Europe, we're facing some decades when the aging of our populations will be drastic. And it will be drastic if we want to maintain a good standard quality of life of old people, and if we want to meet the current entitlements that old people have, also in light of the fact that people are becoming richer. So what we at the Institute for Future Studies have been trying to advocate is that if you are serious about dealing with aging populations, the main issue is perhaps not to reform the pension systems or reform the elderly care systems or even the healthcare systems, but to have the focus on reproducing the future tax base. And this is because we know that the age structure will put increased pressure on the public finances. And we need also know that the way we design social policies will have an effect on how many children people have, how they educate themselves, and how they participate on the labor market. And actually, my first experience with social policy in the Baltic countries was when I was directing a study for the Council of Europe in the mid-90s. It was entitled Welfare State in Crisis, How to Protect the Rights with Control the Costs. And this was the trick everyone wanted to learn. It was no accident that the study was an initiative of the Italian government, and they still struggled with this puzzle. And I asked a political philosopher, how do we deal with this dilemma of sort of protecting rights and also controlling costs? And his answer was cheap rights. This is the answer, but I think that would be a mistake. I think it would be better to increase the number of taxpayers if we are serious about maintaining the quality of rights. I think that we tend to associate social protection systems with negative impacts on the future tax base. And I think that is a mistake. I think that we can identify a number of positive mechanisms if we have a well-managed social protection system. If we have early selected benefits, that is a way of rewarding labor force participation. The more you work, the better your insurance coverage will be. We can also improve matching on the labor market if we have decent unemployment benefits, because then people will use the unemployment benefits as a search subsidy to look for a job that matches the qualifications, not just any job. And it can be good for macroeconomic stabilization. We know that from the past crisis, a number of countries have relied almost solely on the unemployment insurance as automatic stabilizers for the economies. And if, in this Schumpeterian perspective, it can also, if we protect people in case of unemployment, it can promote positive attitudes towards economic restructuring. Of course, badly managed systems and systems without conditions and controls is creating benefit dependency. People will be kept outside the labour market in the absence of rehabilitation measures, in the absence of active labour market policies, etc. So we need to have a balanced approach if we want to make social protection work systems work in terms of increasing the number of taxpayers rather than the opposite. What I would associate with the Nordic model is also what can be labeled as social investment legacy. This goes back to the 1930s when a number of the key social policy makers got a population perspective on social policy from the fact that birth rates were declining very rapidly in the 1920s and 30s, and saw the population as a very important resource in modern society. The active labour market policies in the 50s, 60s can also be seen as a way of looking at the population as an asset that we need to invest in. Early on, lifelong education was identified as a way of modernizing education system, but with clear social implications. So it was the idea of lifelong learning was promoted by Swedish politicians as early as in the late 1960s. I think that this is relevant also for the situation we have today. And I think that we need, in fact, to go beyond the kind of quick responses that we see to the current economic crisis. And I think that the global crisis of our financial institutions make us think outside the box, hopefully. And what I think is worrying here that we talk about investments in physical infrastructure, but human capital investment is getting less attention. And I sincerely hope that climate change, which no politicians can ignore today, was different before Al Gore, but now it's impossible, has in a way prolonged the time horizon of policymakers. And I strongly welcome the 20-year perspective that the Human Development Report is taking, not only backwards but also forward. It's a fantastic idea to think forwardly in this 20-year cycle. When we look back, as is pointed out in this Human Development Report, you can see that and also the President was referring to this, that the grown-ups of today, the young adults, have lived their whole life in freedom and democracy. We should think of the 20-year perspective as the future of those who are born this and next year. and take a perspective that policies implemented should prepare young people with this time horizon. And I think that we should look at this perspective of lifelong learning really as a chain. And if we have a weak link in the chain will break. So economic research and also psychological research has shown that investment in early childhood education is very important for promoting abilities, and is very important foundation for effective investment in education. But what I think today is what all European countries are struggling with is the transition from the school system onto the labour market, where young people are facing increasing demands, and the link between the education system and the labour force is becoming increasingly difficult, and not only as a result of the current economic crisis, but as an underlying trend. And I think this is really worrisome if the first sort of free generation of the Baltic countries are now stepping onto the labour market in a period where there are no jobs offered. And we see the same situation in Sweden. It's of course even worse in Spain and Greece, with 50% youth unemployment. But to underline the perspective pursued by my Lithuanian colleague here in the previous session, it's of course important to have an economy that is promoting learning and innovation. And I think this is not only about research, but at what is happening on the workplace, and I'll come back to that. When people come to the Institute for Future Studies from abroad, we are often talking about the problems we have with our model, the cracks in the surface, the dilemmas and the problems, and often our visitors say, we would love to have your problems, because they think it's compared to the problems that Russians find in their own country with the social dimension, this is really nothing. But I think it's important to understand that social policy programs are never ever. They have to be constantly adapted, constantly reformed in order to meet not the challenges of yesterday, but the challenges of the future. I will try to use the European perspective in order to promote something that is a way of translating the Nordic experience for the future challenges that I see to the European social model. And we know that there's some kind of a confusion about what the European social model is about. The President of the Commission was very helpful in terms of defining it in goal terms. This is about social inclusion and equality of opportunity, but it's saying nothing about the tools, the programs that we want to use for enhancing these goals. Say something about the European realities in a way trying to perhaps problematize the situation also in this part of Europe. We've been engaged in trying to monitor the generosity and the design of social protection systems with regard to what kind of qualifying conditions, who are covered, waiting days, benefit duration, etc. And among other things, also looking at replacement levels. And when we just look at the replacement levels for the core social insurance programs, the Baltic countries don't look all that bad. This is a situation in 2005 for unemployment insurance. The replacement rate is referring to the proportion of the worker's wage that is replaced by unemployment insurance. If this screen had been bigger, you might have seen that Estonia is sort of number 6 here, and in the middle you find Latvia and Lithuania, and it's sort of in the middle of the European picture here. And UK is performing very modestly in terms of benefit levels, and this is the basic security leverage model. We find among the most generous countries here Luxembourg, but also Slovenia. If we're interested in linking then unemployment insurance, and other policies to social inclusion on the labour market, we cannot only look at the generosity of the system, but we also have to look at the active labour market policy. And here it's very clear that the countries in the north are performing better at almost every indicator you have. So the proportion of unemployed people who are actually enrolled in active measures, training, education, etc. is higher, and also the spending per enrolled person is more generous. So here it's clear that not only the continental European countries, but also the Baltic countries have some way to go in order to reach the same kind of investment ambition as we see among the Nordic countries. What I would moreover argue is that the case of unemployment insurance is only one thing. I think one should go into a very program-specific analysis and look at sickness insurance and rehabilitation. We should look at social assistance and the way that countries try to deal with those who are dependent on this lost social safety net, etc. We need to look at programs for the older part of the labor force. But if you want to make serious comparison, we also need to understand that countries differ with regard to the relative importance of different programs. So we may need also to maintain a bigger picture. This is a European reality which I think we cannot disregard. And this is referring to the proportion of the population in the member states living below 50% of the EU median income. So for the entire European Union, the median income and then the proportion of the population living below that, so the European population. And here we see that Latvia and Lithuania and also Poland and then Estonia have the highest proportions of their population below the European poverty line. So this is of course a European reality that have to be part of any serious attempt to deal with social issues. If we look at the national definition of poverty levels, and here I've adapted to the 60% level offered by which is the typical or the European-wide decided level for poverty levels. We see a different picture, at least partly. Here we see that the proportion of the population below 60% of median income in each individual country still varies, and we find that Estonia is sort of in the middle, and Latvia and Lithuania are sort of to the right. And this is of course a consequence of a large number of factors: employment levels, social insurance coverage, the generosity of social insurance programs. But I want to point out to something that is also important, and this is the generosity of the basic income, the social safety net that countries provide. And here we have the situation, or the generosity of the basic safety net as proportion of the median income in each and every country. And as you see, no country will reach the 60% level that the European Union member states have agreed on. Some come close, like Germany, Finland, Denmark, Sweden. But we see that some countries come very far from it. And here I think there may be a lesson for the Baltic countries that the ambitions, also with regard to the national income level of the social safety nets, are low. They're higher than in some countries, and some countries like Greece don't even have national minimum And I have put Italy here, which is slightly misleading because there is no national minimum in Italy. This is only referring to the situation, I think, in Milan. So European countries have agreed on to fight poverty, but they have safety nets that don't really match these joint ambitions. So, what I will try to conclude with in just a few minutes before the moderator will drag me down from the stand here is to say that, okay, we have a lot of instruments to fight income poverty. I think there are some lessons to be learned for water countries, but I also think that if we're serious about dealing with the overall low income levels, we need to combine this with what I call the social investment perspective. And I think the social investment perspective can best be seen as a different analysis of the problems. And the analysis is that problems with low skill is an increasing important factor behind unemployment, in addition to the sort of macroeconomic swings. And the social investment perspective say that social policies can have a productive function. It can be a precondition for growth rather than the opposite. But then we need to understand that investments are costly, and there's no way around that. So we have to mean less consumption today, which is a difficult message in terms of economic crisis. And it's about extracting taxes for investment, because if we're talking about education, in our part of the world, investment in education is done by the public sector. Families, individuals are spending very little money on their own education. We may have to change that too, in light of developments in, for example, Southeast Asia. And that we can learn from European discussions here. And I've talked about that. What we can see in the analysis of what I would label social investment strategies is that economic spending on education system is very important for explaining why some countries grow faster than others. But it's also important for understanding why some countries perform better in regard to the bottom quintile of the income distribution. And then we come to the ways that the education money are invested. And also that to understand that this is not a quick fix. The payoffs to these education investments only come with some time lag. But when we look at the adult population and their productivity and their literacy, it's clear that the Nordic countries perform much better in terms of the investment in the low educated part of the society. What this actually boils down to is if we are serious about reproducing the future tax base, then we have to look at the economic life cycle. And the economic life cycle is about how we invest, how we consume, how we work, how we pay taxes over the life cycle. And the typical pattern is that we start our life with a deficit. So, we start with year 1 and then sort of move on to year 100. We start year 1 with having a deficit because the state is spending money on our parents' parental leave benefits. We are enrolled in daycare, in schools, in gymnasium, in university, and all this is, of course, increasing our deficit towards the state. In addition to that, our family is spending money for our consumption. that is also accumulating the deficit. And then we slowly enter into the labor force and start to be net contributors. And then we continue to work, and after some time we might even have paid back to the state the investment that the state has done. But when you retire, you will again start to accumulate a deficit because of the pensions, the health care, and the elder care. And this is how it looks in Sweden. And it looks a bit problematic because you see it's a very, very big deficit over there. Fairly big here as well. The good news is that there are very few people who are 90 years old. So in reality, the costs are not that. This is a per capita description. But the bad news is then that the number of 90-year-olds will increase. So if you want to solve the public finance problem, we need to change the way that we invest in the education of young people so that they become taxpayers and productive taxpayers, and taxpayers very long period of their life, or at least a longer period than today. And we need to change the way that we transfer resources by the public sector, by the family, and between families, if we want to maintain a balanced approach in our generations. And we can change, and just to illustrate that I will put in the same information for two other countries. First country is Austria. Austria has added these institutions for education, so they are much more efficient in terms of getting young people onto the labor market. On the other hand, they have a very generous pension system, also for early retirement, so they quit labor force much earlier. So here we see that there is room for maneuver, room for designing institutions so that they support the economic life cycle. And here we have the United States, which is often seen as a sort of the best example of sort of promoting labor force participation. But this is truth with some modification. American young people take even longer than Swedish young people to become net contributors, and they exit earlier from the labor force. The good news is that the United States has many people, very high proportion in active ages, and will continue to have so. But again, it shows that our institutions, the way that we organize our society, will have an effect on what I find as a key factor for the future sustainability of these protection systems, namely how they affect the economic life. EU 2020, we talked about the Lisbon strategy. The new future strategy is the EU 2020. It's about smart growth, sustainable growth, inclusive growth. Sounds great. They even have clear targets: 75% employment, investing 3% of GDP in research and development, reduce share of early school leavers, and lifting 20 million out of poverty. Without going into detail about that, I would just like to mention the problems I see with it, which is that when it was decided in 2010, there was a very strong focus on controlling costs. Understandably, due to the deficits in many countries. But there was very little perspective about increasing the future revenue. And I think the very strict focus on cost control will not make a social investment strategy possible. And I think that they missed the targets on secondary education. So growth, innovation, learning economy is not only about research and development, it's about investing in the majority of the population as well. And I also think that the poverty targets were rather meaningless because it's up to the individual member countries to define what kind of poverty they want to fight, and that is very room for sort of manipulating with the numbers. So, the European social models have developed as part of social democracy, as part of social liberalism, and part of social conservatism. ways of finding cooperation between different interest groups in society. And I think it's time to vitalize that kind of agenda again. And I think that it's also clear that what I see as a necessary ingredient of a future sustainable approach, namely social investment, will not happen if we don't take the aging problem serious and see that once we restore the balances in the public finances, if we don't raise taxes enough to invest in education, we'll find ourselves in a much more difficult perspective in just 20 years' time. And if you want to read more about that, it's a new book just coming out this week, and I'll leave some leaflets for that on the table. And thank you very much for your kind attention.